So reaching consensus in government is harder, and with everybody having a different point of view, that's harder than business. Charge more. At every step of every job of everything that I ever did, I should have charged more. I had coaching telling me to charge more. Oh, wait, you're behind on this one. Your problem. Where I came ahead, I win. Where you came behind, you lose. I don't feel like a successful entrepreneur because I never got big. That was my experience. I did not turn into a millionaire. I didn't go to my high school reunion in a jet, in a limo. That was what I thought would happen.
But isn't it ironic that, like, you and I are having that kind of conversation? We're in this constant pace of you grow or you die. There is no, it's okay to have a small shop and run 3 or 4 generations through it. There's no honor in that.
If I could stay home and have more money in my pocket by not working than working hard for a month or two and ending up with less money, that's a bad deal.
Today we have Ken Morrow here. Ken, thank you so much for joining us. Ken, when do you actually remember meeting me?
Okay. I remember meeting you outside of the museum in Gonzales, and you were flying a drone looking around, and I think I struck up a conversation interested in who you were and what you were doing. That's when I remember connecting.
See if I can refresh your memory.
Sure.
Probably to 2002. You were going to Memorial Heights Baptist Church. You and I were in choir together. At Memorial Heights under Steve Scott.
Right.
That's how far back.
Yeah. You've got a great memory. I was thinking about politics that it might come out in this podcast of how I even got into that. And it was actually at Memorial Heights, and they were telling us to greet the people around us. And this dynamic woman that was well-dressed and looked like she was probably wearing red, white, and blue was behind me. And I introduced myself, and her name was Myrna McElroy, and she was the Republican Party chair. And that's how I ended up in that office and involved trying to run for county commissioner soon after. No, I remember her as a political force to be reckoned with. She was the gatekeeper to South Texas. If you were running for some sort of elected office on the Republican ticket, you were going to make a visit through there. Ron Paul had been through her office and she knew him. Of course, Rick Green was somebody that she helped recruit and get into the Texas House. And but everybody knew her, especially at the state level in the Republican Party. She was a character and a force to be reckoned with.
That I remember. Yeah. Part of the reason I wanted to have you on this podcast is I was thinking back through all the different iterations that your life has kind of taken, from IT startups to insurance,
selling toilets,
to your properties, running for public office. You I feel like over your life, you've, in the truest sense of the word, have somehow become a Renaissance man. Like every few years, you've been somehow successful at reinventing yourself. So I think, what has spurred you to move from one profession, one career? Some people would they'd be like, this is my career for the rest of my life.
I guess it's curiosity. My first job was at County Line Barbecue, where I worked for 5 years through being a waiter and a busboy and all of that, and having fun while I was in college. And I probably thought that was a good backup career. And then the IT job that I got lasted 3 or 4 years with a startup that was just out of working in a garage that grew to $22 million in a short couple of years. And then I thought I wanted to be an IT guy, and I was all into that. Somewhere along the way, I had a little bit of an interest in construction and home building. All of it has been kind of startup entrepreneurial stuff. If you give me an idea and no money, I like to go charging after that. And that's what gets me into trouble. I feel honestly my greatest skill set is to be the lead sled dog, to start with nothing, to say, hey, go figure this out, and to try to figure out a system for doing whatever that is. But then growing it much beyond a startup has not been a very good skill of mine. To a mature business is not a good skill. with all of the processes and procedures and accounting. I'm much better operating within a structure with a broad leash.
Right. So it's more icebreaker, less cruise liner.
Yeah, I think that's the best for me. So for the brief career that I had in insurance, they had all of these scripts that you were supposed to memorize and meet somebody at their front door and say this and then say that and say that. And I mean, I threw all of that out immediately and just started talking to people, and it was much more successful for me.
Right.
But you had to have a process and a procedure to train people. And that gave a lot of people a lot of comfort. They wanted to memorize every single comma and inflection point in a script, and whereas I just threw it out.
I think there's a lot of self-awareness there that a lot of people lack.
I have always enjoyed trying to fire myself. I would be better at starting things than maturing them.
Do you ever find it frustrating that when you have that ability to start things, to lead things, that so many people assume that you are also good at the later stages of doing that, and people try to hand you more of those things?
I haven't felt that at all. Pretty clear that when you interview me for being a salesperson, that I'm a salesperson and that I'll have a scope that I can operate within that realm. If I find something that's useful, I'm quick to share it and I want to help develop it. That's a skill, but the idea of running things and controlling things is probably not a skill of mine. I'd love other people to run them. Of course, I ran my own business for 20 years and tried to fire myself repeatedly. Nobody would hire me.
Right now, like, you're not working for yourself full time.
Correct.
You have a job with a salary, commission structure, expense account, whole 9 yards. Walk me through the mental process, basically going from self-employed, entrepreneurial, like businessman for all these years to working for someone again. I mean, where did you start? And because I imagine that's a fairly big shift.
I feel like I had been trying to fire myself for years from my company that was home building. About 8 years ago, some people came to town, maybe 10, and they were doing a new subdivision. And I met them immediately. I liked the developer. I liked the home builder. And they decided to hire me to be the home builder here locally. My intent was to work with them and join their company and build houses for them in multiple areas here and in Floresville, and get started. I think I had been chasing money to make payroll every Friday for so long at that point that I was ready to work for somebody that was small and scrappy, that was more established than I was in business, learn from them. But in that case, I ended up still with my own company, just doing my own thing a couple years later. And the headaches of always making payroll when I haven't been paid, maybe, or constantly billing people, trying to make sure that somebody helped me make payroll. I ran a startup for 20 years. It wasn't a real company that functioned properly. I shouldn't be collecting on Friday at 4:45 to make payroll at 5. And that was a common thing. And so it was exhausting. I think being an entrepreneur and being self-employed the way I did it was incredibly difficult and exhausting. And I got to restart a few times. I got to sell my house, downsize, move to Gonzales, then build a really nice house that was like, 3,800 square feet out by the lake, and then have financial problems, sell it, downsize, start again, live in a nice house. Oh, wait, more financial problems, sell it, pay off debt, live in a rental. So now we're living in a house again that we're paying for, that we've remodeled, that we absolutely love. And the journey it's been tiring. It's been tiring. Now, my kids didn't suffer that much. They always had food. My girls were all cheerleaders. My son had go-karts and a boat to go fishing on. So I feel like the life that our kids had was great. So that was the blessing of being a broke, struggling entrepreneur. It was actually good for the family.
And it may sound cliche,
Yeah.
but like, what would you say is the biggest lesson that you actually learned through that process?
Charge more. At every step of every job of everything that I ever did, I should have charged more. I had coaching telling me to charge more. I would try to add a little bit of fluff into my bids so that when things went wrong, I wasn't in trouble at the end. I tried to implement those strategies, and it was never enough the way I did it. One thing that got me jobs was that I would detail the cost of a house on a spreadsheet that was about 2 pages long. And it would say, plumbing fixture budget, this budget, that budget, and everything was very lined item now. Lumber budget, labor budget for framing and roofing and materials. And it gave the clients way too much information. So let's just say that their fixtures budget for their microwave and the oven and the stovetop and all that stuff was like usually $4,500. Sometimes people told me, no, I want nice stuff. Okay, $6,500. I had a flat fee as a contractor, and I didn't ever make any more if it was nice or anything like that, which most builders would have figured out a way to make more. So there were several things that I should have had like a package. We're building this 3,000 square foot house. It's going to have, sheetrock and white paint on the walls, and it's going to have these basic features, and your price is $350,000 with a good concrete slab that meets specs. By giving all of the detail when things went wrong, is like, oh, look, we came ahead on this one. Oh, wait, you're behind on this one. Your problem. Where I came ahead, I win. Where you came behind, you lose.
Mm.
So I would have to change my bid formats. And also I never built, other than some townhomes that I built, which I still manage, and I really am proud of those, I never built the same thing twice. So there wasn't any economies of scale or learning or repetition other than in the townhomes, which is the first thing I would build again if I were building something again tomorrow, is I'd build townhomes again, because all the subs know how to do it. I know how to do it. And they've been profitable for the investors and profitable for me as the property manager. But single family homes that are custom, I would try to avoid again. It's just hard as a small guy. Maybe when you get big and get to scale, it's a different story.
But it's just that ability just to repeat, rinse, repeat. You know exactly what's happening every time. You're not trying to do something
new every time.
You already know how to do this. Understanding and doing perfection versus starting something and then learning as you go. So what was the initial decision? Like, nope, we've done this for 20 years. Now it's time.
It felt like it had been time several times, because as I met people through different things, I was looking for opportunities to work with somebody else or to mentor me to grow the business to the next level, and none of them worked out. Some of the businesses that I even interviewed with ended up going out of business, and then there was still me just running around with my pickup truck and a couple of guys that had worked with me for a number of years doing remodeling and building. I guess the final straw was after the freeze, not getting paid on a couple of jobs. And I just decided I don't want to do that anymore. If I could stay home and have more money in my pocket by not working than working hard for a month or two and ending up with less money, that's a bad deal. So that was the impetus. There's got to be something else to do, a better way. So then I tried insurance for a year. I actually enjoyed that because I was running around all over Central Texas selling insurance to small businesses. And then I got this opportunity where I'm selling plumbing supplies all over Central Texas to wholesalers, which I just love. And when I interviewed for that job, my boss, said that he had a guy that had been working with him 20 plus years. And the guy was in his 70s. And I said, "You're kidding." He said, no, he's really good. He's been at this since he was a kid. And I said, you mean there's a job I can be really good at into my 70s and relevant, and you're going to hire me now at age 52? I can't wait. Where do I sign on the dotted line? So I'm thrilled to have a regular job. I'm sure that all of that 20 years had a purpose, but it felt like it was a long, hard battle. That was my experience. I did not turn into a millionaire. I didn't go to my high school reunion in a jet and a limo. That was what I thought would happen.
I think that there's a phenomenal amount of people that are trying in the entrepreneurial space. They're underfunded. They don't know what they're doing. They're faking it till they make it.
Mm-hmm.
And some of them are very successful at doing that. Most of them are not. Why do you think it is so hard to move on
to the next thing after something fails? I don't know. I was talking to somebody. I have a space for lease down on the square in Gonzales right now, and somebody called me wanting to lease it yesterday. And I talked with him and I said, so what do you want to do? And he says, I want to sell like cards and these other action figures, and I want to sell antiques in there and some other stuff. And I said, okay. I don't know that there's going to be any traffic that's good for those things. And I've had 4 failed antique shops. I would rather you not lose money at this, with the rent and everything and the bills. Are you prepared to sign a 6-month lease? And are you willing to lose $5,000 or $6,000? He said, yes, absolutely. I want to try. I need to try. I'm willing to lose that. I have that much money to lose. I said, okay. But I had people that were always trying to start a restaurant and in a different space that had the grills and the kitchen and all of the stuff that they needed. And I watched people fail multiple times. And my pitch for that one was, do you have $10,000 that you're willing to lose to chase your dream, to pay rent? And if it doesn't work out, and I had somebody open a restaurant that closed in 3 weeks. They didn't factor in the fact that 100 people might not knock down their door the first day and buy all of their food. And then, you're just like, that could have taken a little bit better planning. That's probably where I refined my pitch. Do you have $10,000 to lose before we even sign this 6-month lease in this space that already has all the equipment? So I think that I actually really care about entrepreneurs, and through my own trials, I try to be a helpful guide.
You ran for office. I don't think you actually made office, if I remember right.
Yeah, I ran.
So talk to me. Tell us that story.
So that's when I was at church, and honestly, being a Christian, I have always had an interest in politics. I was one of 2 kids in my high school that we watched Reagan's speeches. And the teacher would ask anybody watch Reagan's State of the Union speech, and we were like 2 of us. And so there was some core of me that was always interested in some amount of politics and government. And then when I at church turned around and met Myrna McElroy, when we had just gotten to Gonzales, then she had a space in her building that I subleased from her for $100 or $200 a month just for a desk, and started doing that IT consulting business again, which had failed, which was the reason I had moved to Gonzales in the first place. And while I'm sharing that office with Myrna, she said, hey, you ought to run for political office. And so I said, okay. Sounded like a good idea. It was a job that had some amount of base pay, and I enjoyed campaigning. I didn't really realize what campaigning was, but I went door to door and asked for as many votes as I could get. And on that time in 2004, the Republican ticket was not what you did to win elections in Gonzales County. Republicans gained favor over years, but it was a traditionally Democrat leading county.
Yeah, I remember that.
Except for maybe president. They might have made an exception there. So when I was new into town, I had only been here 2 years, and I knocked on a bunch of doors and I got 46% of the vote. Everybody said, that was a really, really, really good showing. You should be proud of yourself. You'd only been here 2 years and you weren't even on the right side of the ticket to get favorable turnout. So I enjoyed running for office then. And then that opportunity came up a couple of years ago with a phone call again from my pastor that said, hey, there's this terrible person that's no good and they're all bad and they're unopposed. Do you know anybody that would run for State Board of Education? I said, I'll do it. And so I got the phone call on a Friday, and then I filed to run on a Monday, beating the deadline by a couple of hours. And that led up
It seems to be a theme.
Yeah.
Like, the payroll.
Yeah. Just in time. Campaigning over 16 counties is a whole lot different than knocking on doors of your neighbors in your small town. Again, in that case, the results were actually very good in all of the small communities that were right-leaning, but Bexar County was very left-leaning. It only voted 41% for Governor Abbott, and I needed to run on Abbott's coattails. Nobody knew who Ken Morrow was. So 41% of Bexar County, I got the same amount that Abbott did, was enough to sink the whole campaign, where I had done much better in the rural areas that didn't have the population.
How has being a part of governance of a town or a county, how did it change your perspective on how business works?
Business is easier than everything on a county or a board or a city. Getting consensus with a bunch of different people with different points of view is a whole lot harder. If you're running a business, you have a decision. The reason I like those townhomes so much is the decisions were always based on a business thing. If I put crown molding in this townhome and it cost me $2,000 to do it in all 4 units, am I going to get any additional rent for that? Probably not. One person said, well, yeah, I like crown molding, and to me, it makes it worth it. It's a feature that makes it nice. Maybe people won't realize why they like it and why it's nice, but I like it. It's worth it to me. The next investor said it's not worth it to me. I don't know that I'll get $1 more for crown molding, so I don't want to do it. But it's still an intelligent conversation, right? I'm not going to rent this place for more if I have a $200 toilet versus a $100 toilet. The rent's going to be the same. So I'm trying to draw an analogy between being a builder and the rational decisions that you make for finances. But when you're on a board, right now we have a giant flag that flies on the square that's lit up. It's a great feature. It cost $50,000.
The flag or per year to take care of it?
The flag, the pole, the lighting, the install, and the purchase of the original flags. And there were multiple sets of Texas flags, come and take it flags, and U.S. flags. Several years ago, I was on EDC, and to buy new flags is like $20,000. But somebody was resourceful, Andy Rodriguez, and found out that we could get our flags repaired, all of them, in like tip-top shape for $4,000. So he was a businessman. He was a smart guy. He found a different way. In the original proposal to do that big flag that's a hallmark of our downtown, that was a ton of money to spend on something that you couldn't prove would have any result. And that's very hard to convince a city council. And it was also hard to convince the board that was making that decision that this is the right thing they should be doing with their money. Maybe they should be fixing the sidewalks, or maybe they should be doing something else. So reaching consensus in government is harder. And with everybody having a different point of view between aesthetics or cost, in tourism was easy for a long time. Every question was answered by, if we spend this money, does this put heads in beds? We're funded from hotel motel tax. So everything that we spend should put heads in beds. Okay. So the convention center that we help fund, the expo center, that was a good use of fund, because when people come to the expo center, they stay in hotels. That puts heads in beds. Some of the stuff that we did that promoted the Alamo, tied with Gonzalez, where people went to the Alamo and we helped sponsor and pay for something of their cost. It's hard to prove that put heads in beds. It was a good thing to tie ourselves to the Alamo. I stood in front of city council and said, if we could get 1% of the Alamo traffic, our town would forever be changed. That's harder than business. Yeah, I think there's a lot of business owners that aren't entrepreneurs. That some of the guys that I worked with, all guys that were all kind of my size, that were, had a couple of employees, for no more than 6 or 8, that had a couple of trucks with their name on the side, and they were making payroll for themselves and for their employees, but they weren't building a business. They weren't trying to scale it. They weren't trying to grow beyond this town. So they're not really entrepreneurs. They're just self-employed. I don't feel like a successful entrepreneur because I never got big. But then again, I made it 20 years without completely failing and going bankrupt, and I didn't quit. So there's some level of success in that, but it didn't. It didn't survive me. I didn't create a business that outlasted myself.
It's really hard. There's a guy by the name of Jeff Ducharme who like first kind of challenged me to the concept of like, do you actually have a business worth selling?
A lot of the guys want to just pass down their business to their family members. So you have multiple generations of plumbers or electricians or HVAC guys, and it's very hard to get those businesses to scale up. And they may not even want to, or they may not have the skills to have more than 2 or 3 vans. And that's fine if you make a living at it, but it's different than being an entrepreneur that thinks about, how do I make this business?
But isn't it ironic that like you and I are having that kind of conversation and we're like, is that really, success? I think that's one of the things that I've noticed in between how I've seen small businesses operate in, like, let's say Europe, and how they operate here. We're in this constant pace of you grow or you die. There is no, it's okay to have a small shop and run 3 or 4 generations through it. There's no honor in that. Here.
I think you're right. I think you're onto something. We have a different mentality here in America. If you don't blow it up to $1 billion or tens of millions or whatever, and you're not on a yacht or an airplane, you just haven't made it. I think that's the perception.
Where it's like, how do we change our culture in a way that honors those small businesses? That says that because we like to say the small businesses are the backbone of America, right? That's the cliche talk.
Absolutely.
Right. But small businesses aren't the backbone of America anymore.
And let's just say that you're so clever that you created Instagram, and I just heard somebody say that Instagram was 12 or 24 people when it got bought, for hundreds of millions of dollars, and then incorporated into a larger business. Those are so infrequent that it's hard to contemplate them. But I bet you there's 100 people, 100 companies trying some different version of Instagram right now, and there's only one.
Oh, you think
that really made
only 100?
Oh yeah, I could be wrong. I could be shooting a little low, but we don't hear about the 100 that didn't make it.
Mm. It's such a catch-22 because without people taking chances, without the entrepreneurial kind of mindset, it's hard to move into the innovation, because that's normally what it takes. It takes people like you or me who are like, all right, no money, have a chance. I see something I like, and we just go for it. Do you think the entrepreneurial culture that we have currently is dangerous?
I want to almost give you a smart ass remark to this. I want it to be too big to fail.
Mm.
I want to be so big that even if I'm incompetent, I'm too big to fail, and then the government's going to bail me out. Because that's what we did, right? With all the banks and the financial savings and loans and all of that stuff. And they were making bad decisions at a very, very high level and getting a lot of money for it. And that, I think, is one of the more dangerous cultures, that the government is stepping in and saving things, like the SNLs or the the stuff in Silicon Valley last year. They step in and save it because it'll lead to a catastrophic crash. And now everything is just keeps, the bubble just keeps getting bigger, and the bigger just keep getting bigger. They just swallow up other companies. That's their innovation, is to swallow up a smaller company, get bigger, get more proprietary, and put nice little moats around their business to protect themselves. So how do you compete with that as an entrepreneur? You either get bought when you're on your way up, or you're going to get crushed by one of those guys.
I think it's kind of interesting because the system that you're talking about is basically the big businesses get to play the socialistic game. The rest of us have to play the capitalist game.
Right. There were, when I was a home builder in this small town, one of the lumberyard guys said, it's only you and another guy left. All of the other guys, but there used to be 24 guys here that you could call that were capable of building a house. 24 guys in this small town of 10,000 people that were capable of building a house. And now there's, just a couple of guys with a crew that can do it anymore. And then, so you've got competition from somebody I respect, Tilson Homes, that does really well all over Texas. They're still sort of a small business, and but they're using crews that, will travel from Houston to Dallas to do electrical or plumbing or whatever, because they have a commitment to Tilson. And there's no disrespect there, but it's really hard to beat that scale at a local level. They're going to get better deals on their purchases of materials than a little guy. And so it's hard to beat that economies of scale once you get there. But getting there is a tough road.
So how do you see technology changing the scope of business in a small town?
When you and I talked just a few weeks ago socially, and we were talking about AI, and I didn't want anything to do with it because I didn't want to power up the Terminator and have my computer be one of the millions that were linked together that created a bad result that we didn't see. And you showed me how useful AI could be in marketing, and created a very good card that with a minor tweak I would mail out or email, and you did it in 60 seconds to a minute. That could have taken a really, really talented graphic artist all day long on a good day to create what you did using AI in 60 seconds. I've been listening to podcasts for weeks now since I saw what you were able to do. I really think that the competitive advantage in AI is going to be building proprietary systems for the back end of your operations that are proprietary to you, that help your business be more efficient and help you with your customers and make their business easier. That's what I'm trying to do right now. Just as a salesperson, I'm asking my customer what I can do to be easier to work with. Can I make an automated system so that you order from me because I'm so easy to order from?
Everyone seems to think that they want equality in business, and people are talk about AI being the big equalizer. But with what you just talked about was trying to get a competitive advantage using AI. Do you think that equality is really what people want inside of business? Truly?
No, everybody wants to win. Nobody wants equality. Everybody wants a competitive advantage to win. That's the good thing about business. Government's the one that's trying to create equality of outcome. Regardless the fact that you've been here doing this podcast in your studio with all of these cameras and all of this technology and all of the extra effort that you're making, what if there's a guy next door with one camera and one microphone doing a podcast and not working as hard and hasn't been in this business for 12 years with experience? We don't want equality of outcome. We don't want that guy next door with one camera and mic to do as well as you with 12 years of experience. But if he does do well, we're going to celebrate him because he happened to find a content that we knew nothing about, and he found an audience that was amazing. I'm going to make up Pokemon cards, something I know nothing about, but that kid next door does. He's going to get the outcome potentially that he deserves, but it's still going to be hard for him to get the eyeballs on his podcast. as opposed to being in a professional studio with a professional that knows what they're doing. We can't guarantee your outcome, but then you're also competing with somebody that has 100 people competing with you
Right.
in a studio. So you get to be nimbler. You get to be more clever. You get to think of things that they aren't going to think of, and they've got 100 people to make a decision. So that's the entrepreneurial part. Is the fun part is if you figure out on what is going to be successful, then you can do well. I'll let you know when I figure it out.
All right. So what is one question that you will leave to the next person? Be on this podcast. You get to ask one question, not even knowing who they are. What is one question that you would ask?
Do you have enough money to be doing what you're doing or what you're planning on doing? That's the question I wish I had asked myself all the way along. Do you really have enough money to be doing what you're doing? And of course, all of the entrepreneurs, the Mark Cubans out there, they all started with nothing. He sold trash bags door to door. That's a funny story, but he learned how to sell, I think, as a teenager. So it's a bit of a contradiction, because the other good thing is if you have no money, you're forced to do things to make money, and that's where the innovation comes from. But more money in my pocket sure would have made it easier along the way.
All right. Well, thank you for coming in, and we'll see you and hopefully talk to you again soon.
Thank you, John.
Thank you, bud.